Komið blessuð og sæl. Welcome back to Icelandic for Foreigners. My name is Brian. In this video, we're going to dive deeper into Icelandic cases, particularly the nominative case. What does it mean and when do we use it? This video is a good follow-up to the video that I made several years ago that gave an overview of Icelandic cases. If you haven't watched that video yet, I encourage you to go check it out before you dive into this video because it'll help give you, the overview first, which will help give context to the more detailed description that we have in this video. So I encourage you to go watch it, although we are going to be reviewing some of the concepts that I talk about in that video in this video. Now you'll remember, if you've watched that video, that a case is the form that a word takes which tells you how it functions in the sentence. In Icelandic, it only applies to nouns, pronouns, and adjectives. In Icelandic, there are 4 cases. There is the nominative, which we're going to talk about in this video. There's also the accusative, the dative, and the genitive. I'm going to make one video for each of those cases to explain the most common ways that they are used. And that's what this video is. It's the most common ways that the nominative is used. Here is kind of the general rule for the nominative case, and we're going to talk about some specifics later. So in general, the nominative form is used for the subject of the sentence or the subject of the clause. It's the form that you're going to find when you look a word up in the dictionary. I'm going to show you a quick list of its different usages, and we're going to get into each one specifically afterward. So it's used, as I just mentioned, for the subject of the sentence, including subordinate clauses. It's used with equative verbs, and I'm going to talk about what that means. It's used for comparisons, for example, with the conjunction eins og, and with comparative adjectives and adverbs with the conjunction en. It's used with a whole bunch of other conjunctions, which we're going to talk about each one specifically. And then it's also used for the subject of relative clauses, and we're going to talk about what that means. At the end of the video, we're going to talk about the major exception for using the nominative case as the subject. We're going to talk about impersonal verbs, which turn everything around a little bit and make it a little more complicated. So let's talk first about using the nominative as the subject of the sentence. Now, the subject of the sentence is the noun or the pronoun who is doing the action. And in Icelandic, the nominative word in the sentence almost always tells us what the subject of the sentence is. So here's a very simple example. Ég tala íslensku. I speak Icelandic. Now, the subject of the sentence is I, because I am the one who speaks. So we use a nominative form of the word, which is ég. That is a nominative pronoun. Here's another example. Jón og Guðrún komu í bæinn í nótt, which means Jón and Guðrún came to town tonight. So the subjects of the sentence are Jón and Guðrún. They are the ones who come to town, or who came to town. So we are going to use the nominative form of Jón and the nominative form of Guðrún. Now, I want to look at some examples to kind of see how this works and why it's so important to understand this concept. So in this sentence, kötturinn elti hundinn, this means the cat chased the dog. And that's obviously different than saying hundurinn elti köttinn, the dog chased the cat. We can understand that the two English sentences have a different meaning, right? So in English, when we want to be specific about who does the action, it's important to put the words in the right order. If we put the cat first, cat chased the dog, that means something different than if we put dog first and say the dog chased the cat. But Icelandic doesn't actually work that way. It's less important the order of the words, and it's more important which form of the word we use. So if we say hundin elti kötturinn, you might think looking at this that this means that the dog chased the cat. But if you notice here, kötturinn is the word that is in nominative. So this tells us that actually köttur, or kötturinn, the cat, is the one who is doing the chasing, even though it doesn't come at the beginning of the sentence, even though it doesn't come before the verb. And that's why these cases are so important in Icelandic, because they tell you who's doing what in the sentence, and it makes the word order not nearly as important as it is in English and in many other languages. So here we have kötturinn, that's the word that is in nominative. That tells you the cat is chasing. The nominative tells you who is doing the action. This is very important when learning Icelandic, because you'll come across a lot of sentences where they structure the sentence differently than in English, and it's very important that you recognize the word that is in nominative so that you know who is doing the action. Here's an example using an adjective, because if you remember, I said that adjectives also need to change forms depending on the role in the sentence, or in this case, the noun that they are modifying. So, gömul kona sat við arinin og prjónaði. That means an old woman sat by the fireplace and knitted. So the old woman is the subject of the sentence, so we need to use a nominative noun for old, which is gömul, along with a nominative noun, which is kona. Here's another example. Hádegi fór lati maðurinn í vinnu. At noon, the lazy man went to work. Again, the lazy man is the subject, so we need the nominative form of the adjective and the noun. Let's talk about subordinate clauses. Subordinate clauses are when we join two sentences together using some sort of verb along with the conjunction að, or that. So here is an example. Ég vona að systir mín komi. In English, this would be, I hope that my sister comes. So it's like we have two sentences here. I hope and my sister comes. And just like in English, both of these sentences or both of these phrases have their own actor, or they have their own subject. So, and they're joined together with að. So we need to make sure that ég is in the nominative form, and so is systir mín. It's also in the nominative form. Here's another example. Hún veit að Jón hefur ekki efni á því. She knows that Jón can't afford it. So hún is in nominative, and so is Jón, because it's like we're putting two sentences together. She knows, and Jón can't afford it. So we push these two sentences together, we connect them using að, and both of those phrases has their own nominative subject. The next situation where you use a nominative word is with what are called equative verbs. An equative verb is a verb that connects two ideas and says that one is like the other. The most common is að vera, to be. For example, hún systir mín. She is my sister. It's saying that one thing is similar to or compared to the other. And when you do that with these equative verbs in Icelandic, it makes it so that on both sides of the verb we have the nominative. So hún is nominative, and so is systir mín. Here's another example. Jón var verkfræðingur. Jón was an engineer. Jón is a nominative word, and so is verkfræðingur. Here's one with an adjective. Ég hef aldrei verið svona svangur. I have never been so hungry. So ég is nominative, and so is svangur, which is on the other side of að vera. Here are some other common equative verbs in Icelandic, although there are many more that are not on this list. Að verða, to become. Hún vill verða læknir. She wants to become a doctor. On both sides of the verb að verða, we have the nominative form of the word. Heita, which means to be called. This is what you use when you introduce yourself. Hann heitir Sverrir. His name is Sverrir. And Sverrir is the nominative form of the name. Að verðast, to appear. For example, Anna virtist ofsa reið. Anna appeared very angry. We have nominative on both sides of the verb. And reynast, for example, það reyndist erfitt. It turned out difficult. We have nominative on both sides. The next situation is when we compare two different things using eins og. For example, hún spelar eins vel og systir sín. She plays as well as her sister. So eins vel og, as well as. And this is kind of the same idea that we were talking about earlier, where we're connecting two ideas with a conjunction. So we're saying she plays and her sister plays. And so we're comparing two things that each have their own subjects. And so we have the nominative on both sides. Here's another example. Han eins hávaxinn og ég. He is as tall as me. Or in more, I guess, proper English, he is as tall as I. In English, it's okay to say he is as tall as me. That's pretty common in modern colloquial speech. But in Icelandic, you have to have the nominative on both sides. So it's very necessary that you say han eins hávaxinn og ég, and that you have ég on the other side. Here's another situation where you use the nominative with a comparative and then the conjunction en. So that's when we're saying that something is bigger than or faster than. So here's an example. Bretland stærra en Ísland. Great Britain is larger than Iceland. So here we're comparing two things, and we're going to use the nominative on both sides. Bretland is the nominative form, and Ísland is the nominative form. It's like saying Great Britain is larger than Iceland is, but we can cut out the second is. Here's another example. Siggi hleypur hraðar en ég. Siggi runs faster than me, or Siggi runs faster than I. Again, you need to use ég in this situation in Icelandic because you need to have the nominative on both sides. So it would be incorrect to say Siggi hleypur hraðar en mig. That's not how comparatives work in Icelandic. Okay, here's a nice list of conjunctions. It's not a complete list, but it's some other situations where you're going to use nominative, even though there are multiple, I guess, phrases that are put together. And that's what conjunctions really do. They connect two ideas. So, en, that means but. Ég bauð honum en hann vildi ekki koma. I invited him, but he didn't want to come. So here we have the nominative form ég, I invited him, and then we have a second idea, which is he didn't want to come. So we're going to need the nominative again for hann. Það varð heitt þegar sólin birtist. So here we're using the conjunction þegar, which means when. It got hot when the sun appeared. So here we have two ideas. It got hot and the sun appeared. We're connecting them with a conjunction, which means we're going to have two subjects. Þau komu ekki að því að þau höfðu ekki tíma. They didn't come because they didn't have time. Two different ideas connected with að því að, which means because. Hann fær lélegar einkunnir þótt hann sé klár. He gets bad grades even though he is smart. So even though is a conjunction, and we're connecting two ideas. So we have nominative on both sides. Ég veit ekki hvort hún hafi rétt fyrir sér. I don't know whether she is right. Hvort means whether, so we're connecting two ideas. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about with the nominative is the relative clauses. This is when we use a separate phrase to describe a noun or pronoun more. For example, here I'm just going to read the English one first. The book that she wrote was published a year ago. In Icelandic, bókin sem hún skrifaði var gefin út fyrir ári síðan. So here we have the book was published a year ago, and we want to give more information by saying it's the book that she wrote. And so we're giving more information about the book when we say she wrote or that she wrote. That is a relative clause. And the relative clause may have another subject, like in this sentence. All right, now we're going to talk about the main exception to nominative words being used as the subject, and that is for impersonal verbs. Now, I made an entire video just about impersonal verbs. If you want all the details, go watch that video. But basically what this idea is that there are some verbs in Icelandic that are they're strange and they treat subjects differently. And it's especially these verbs that where the person who is experiencing them, it's less like they have a choice about experiencing it, and it's more like it is something that is happening to them, that they are the patient of the action as opposed to the agent. So some examples, mig klæjar, I itch. We don't say ég klæja, we say mig klæjar, like it itches me, or like it causes me to itch. So that's with an accusative subject. Mig dreymir, I dream. Mig svimmar, I am dizzy. Mig langar, I want or I desire. So these are things where we use an impersonal verb that has a subject that is not in the nominative. And that's usually because it's being used sort of as a, like it's something that happens to the subject as opposed to something that they choose. Here are some with the dative, with a dative subject, mér finnst, mér leiðist, and mér líður. So those are just some examples of impersonal verbs where the main subject is actually not in nominative. Thanks for watching the video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave comments below and stay posted for more videos on Icelandic cases. Bless, bless.